Ladies and gentlemen,
Welcome to our show, The Quest for Prometheus.
Quest for Prometheus has a history, doesn't it, Billy?
It does. I started this search for knowledge and truth in modern politics and history way back in 1998 with a Queen's Public Access Television program in New York. Q34 and 35 for those of you that remember these things.
Who was up late at night watching QPTV?
With friends, with some other colleagues, and it lasted for like decades. I think they still play it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then we had a radio show on the Last FM, a Greek radio station here in New York and online.
Last FM.
And we had with another three colleagues as well. It lasted from 2004 to 2005, and we also with George had a online Quest for Prometheus show.
Early online for me, like back in the
early internet.
What was Real Player? Remember Real Player?
That's still there, but yeah, that was the beginning
50,
of that stuff.
52, 56K modem type of stuff. Yeah, that was. We were innovators in our time, weren't we?
We discussed very burning issues of the time. You know, the movies that were coming out about Alexander the Great and some other things. But anyway, we're back now, and we have this long history with the Quest for Prometheus. We have hundreds of programs, which I think I'm going to eventually digitize and put on some platform. And everything is here on, first of all, you're seeing it on Facebook live on Love Letters to Greece, and also on our Patreon page. That's patreon.com, and that's our show, and the whole site of everything Hellenic is called Hellenic History Series. So that has mythology, history, the Quest for Prometheus show, music from my band Porphyra, classical music from Panagiotis Karoussos, an art book I'm working on, so many things. There's a lot of things. Just go to patreon.com/Hellenic History Series and become a friend, join our journey together. And we want to thank you for following us also on Facebook here on Love Letters to Greece. So without further ado, hashtag Q4 Prometheus is the hashtag for the show. And this is episode number 3.
Episode 3.
And Cyprus. This is George's trip to Cyprus and the occupied part of Northern Cyprus.
Right. Occupied part of Cyprus.
So tell us, George, what is it that inspired you to go to Cyprus and then to visit the occupied part, to see it for yourself? What made you do it?
Well, you know, this is the interesting question. It's because when you go to Cyprus, it's not like there's not enough things to do in the the free part of Cyprus, right? The Republic of Cyprus. You could do anything you want over there, and it's very beautiful, and there's so many tourist attractions. So if you just want to go and have a great time, you can go to, you could keep everything in the unoccupied part.
It's a very beautiful Greek
It's a nice, beautiful experience, and you'll love it, I think. Why did I go to the occupied part? Because...
let me stop you there. Hold on. Because I think a few years ago we were discussing Cyprus when I wanted to bring my production, the rock opera Anna and Vladimir, the Love That Rocked the World, to the Republic of Cyprus, and I was speaking with government officials there. And you weren't that familiar with Cyprus at the time, and the Russians' connection with Cyprus as well. And lo and behold, now you have fallen in love with Cyprus, the island of Aphrodite. And
I love Cyprus.
You become an expert on it, and that's why we always talk about Cyprus.
I have a lot to learn. And maybe we'll have some experts that will help us at one point.
Maybe we will. We'll discuss that at the end of this episode. Stay tuned. But, you become sort of an expert on it, and you keep abreast of the political situation right now that's happening,
right?
And its history. So, tell us what happened. What made you go? And
what made me go? Well, first of all, what made me go to Cyprus, obviously, is as a Phil Hellene, as someone who needs to see, the land of the Hellenes. I absolutely felt I had to go to Cyprus. It's just part of. If you go there, there are museums there that have things from excavations from thousands of years ago, and that is very, very clear. Evidence of the Hellenic presence in that island before anybody else was noted there. So that makes it very clear that Greeks are indigenous to Cyprus from the very, very beginning.
I always mention every time we discuss Cyprus, I have a connection from my mother's town in the Peloponnese in Greece, Kalavrita. Mm-hmm. Our town is called Mazeka or Klitoria. It was an ancient city, and it used to be Arcadian. And the actual language, the dialect of the Cypriots comes from this place. It's called the Arcado-Cypriot language. So the Cypriots might sound a little bit different to the native Greek speakers, the mainland Greeks, and to maybe a foreigner, but they're actually speaking Greek with a different dialect, right? I mean, did you, from being with us so many years in the community here in New York, Did you hear Cypriot a little bit differently? Was it
Absolutely not.
no? Right? Okay.
I have no clue who's speaking with the Cypriot accent or the mainland Athenian accent, or who's from Macedonia and so on and so forth.
Okay,
So
okay.
I would have no clue at all. But I asked the Cypriot actor actually what the accent was, and he told me that the Cypriots say sh, which actually Russians say too, believe it or not.
Shu, yeah.
So there's a sh there, and he made a few other explanations, but it was very interesting. Yeah, it was very interesting to hear. I was very curious, and I had a long conversation. But anyway, I don't want to. Again, the Republic of Cyprus, the beautiful unoccupied part that is.
Visit.
Yeah, definitely go visit. It's a lot of fun. So, and of course there are lots of Russian tourists that go there. So I was like, okay, I want to see what they're all raving about too. So it was a lot of fun to do that. But so why did I go to the occupied part?
Exactly.
As per your question, well, I've never been to an occupied country before.
Okay.
It's but it wasn't because I just wanted to say, oh, cool, I was in the UN buffer zone and I did this and that. I think it's because, first of all, that is all part of one country, and that's the official position of the Cypriot government. It is one country, actually.
It's an island country. It's, I think, the second largest country of the island of the Mediterranean after Sicily.
Maybe
I
didn't do my
Sardinia,
homework on
Sicily,
that.
and Cyprus. So it's a very big island, but it's still an island country. It's small in general to something else, and you can travel it.
Well, you can actually drive around in one day. I mean, the whole island if you wanted to. But
I've seen footage. He's done it.
Yeah, but when it comes to the occupied part, it's.
Well, first of all, to get there, what did you do? You have to pass through something, right? The British.
I'll explain that in a minute. Yeah. I just wanted to. There's one important point I wanted to make about why I did it is because I wanted to see what did once belong to the Greek people, where they was their indigenous land and now no longer is. I wanted to see what it had turned into and what it was like living in that kind of an occupational regime. And I had a small taste. I wasn't there for long. I was there for 48 hours, and that was it. But I didn't get to see as much as I thought I would. But it was just I just wanted that emotional experience of seeing an occupied Greek country. It was just interesting to me to feel what I think a lot of Cypriots, or at least not, I can't feel entirely what they feel, but just a little bit of that.
You read about it, and you know of the survivors. You've met them. You met a lot here in New York.
Yeah.
And I've been to Turkey a few times in my youth, so
you would understand.
We talked about this, that even though it's something alien and something that we don't like at times, we need to also see it for ourselves. We can't be so close-minded. We need to see things for ourselves as human beings, as people that need to see and learn more than just book or what the internet tells you, right? So.
Oh sure, yeah, you have to. I think it's not a bad idea to just to have that feeling, even though it's not a very it's obviously going to be a very difficult feeling. And I have to say that when I was there, it was a very difficult feeling. I didn't feel easy. It was especially having to spend the night there. It was not an easy feeling at all. It was a tough feeling, honestly. But I'm glad I did it because I experienced something, and that's always going to be with me now. And again, I didn't go there for the cheap kebabs or anything like that. That's not why I did.
No leather jackets, no tiles.
Yeah, no counterfeit goods or anything like that.
No, you just the basic necessities that you needed.
Yeah,
exactly. All right. So you had this yearning and you wanted to see it. And what's the first thing you saw?
Well, I showed up in Nicosia, right, the capital of Cyprus, and that's the most famous border. Well, you can't call it a border. It's not really a border. It's one country, right? It's a checkpoint. So you're crossing a checkpoint which divides the divides the unoccupied and occupied part, and it's very easy. You just show your passport, and no stamps, none of that, and you just walk right through pretty much, and that's it. They scan your passport. That's it. The only thing is that if you arrive into the occupied part from Turkey, that's the only airport you're allowed to fly from to the occupied part. You will not be allowed into the unoccupied part. That's the condition is that you have to enter through a legal port of entry into the country, and that is through the Larnaca or the Paphos airports.
So Nicosia is the capital, and it's a divided capital, right?
Yes, it's the last divided capital in Europe, actually.
So Berlin used to be divided, right?
Right.
Former Soviet Union.
It's like Berlin.
So yeah,
it's like the old divided. As a matter of fact, there's even a cafe right on the checkpoint that says the divided or whatever, the wall or whatever. There's some reference to Berlin. I forgot what it was. But bottom line is that it's a very easy thing to just go over there. But and then you walk in, and then the occupied part of Nicosia is a little bit. It has a different feeling. It's like a smaller feeling. You'll see. I'll share a video later on about that.
So we're gonna do a special segment with the footage that George has taken on Quest for Prometheus as well. So you'll be able to see some with the experience what he saw and some pictures and videos.
Yeah, I'll show you. I mean, where I was, and give you my impressions of it. But so that's basically how I was. When I was there, it wasn't for a very long time, but I went to Kyrenia.
Okay.
So I spent some time in Nicosia. Then I went to Kyrenia, and then after that, I went back to basically Nicosia the next day, and left. So it was. I really didn't spend much time there. I spent 2 nights there. I know some people there, and they set me up. So. But that's basically it. So Kyrenia was beautiful. I came there in the late part and
say hello to Anna.
Oh yes,
Hi,
Anna Mitofановna. Здравствуйте. That's one of our Russian friends.
Welcome.
And so that was basically, it was a fairly short trip, but I got to see St. Hilarions Castle.
Okay.
It's a medieval castle where it's also a Byzantine fortress. Of course, the Greek city of Kyrenia, which is now called Gurne. And that was mostly a Greek city. Most of those parts, it was about 80%. This is one thing a lot of people don't get. 80% of the currently occupied part of Cyprus was all inhabited by Greek Cypriots. Okay, Turkish Cypriots lived in mostly these little enclaves, and the Turkish army, what it did was it attacked the most arable part of Cyprus at the time, which had 80% of the Cypriot economy. And they attacked that, and they expelled, mostly, they expelled most of the Greek population from that area.
Over 300,000 people.
Yeah.
Expelled, raped.
Right. It was a very savage operation, Operation Attila.
For those of you that like historical statistics, 40,000 Turkish soldiers occupied the northern part, and what George witness was also a few other interesting things, especially that the Turkish government subsidizes a lot of the infrastructure of the northern part.
All of it, I would say, pretty much.
Yeah,
because the only thing they get money from is they get money from people who go there for tourist purposes.
Okay.
So that was and I want to mention this one point. There are a lot of, I know that it's a sensitive issue to just cross over to that side for a lot of Greek Cypriots and Greeks in general. They're like, why are you legitimizing the government? And I talked to some of my Greek friends. And what I decided I'd do is that after I figured when I go there, I'd calculate however much money I spent, and then I would donate the same sum and then some to a Greek charitable cause, which is what I did. So I felt that was the honorable way of dealing with that problem.
That's wonderful.
That moral dilemma, yeah.
And more people should do that if you feel the need to go somewhere like that. But George, thank you for doing that. But now, you mentioned the 80% property was owned by Greeks. Now, what is going on with we discussed earlier about students coming from abroad?
Oh, that's another mess. Yeah,
let's discuss the students, and let's discuss the people that are
the downshifters and all those people. Right.
Let's
okay.
tackle those
Students. There's a lot of the Cypriot governments. I mean, not the Cypriot, the Turkish Republic of the so-called Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus. TRNC. Yeah. They're always looking a way to make money because there are sanctions applied to that area. They can't do. It's hard for them to do business.
No country other than Turkey recognizes this occupied part. By the way.
Right. Exactly. It's an unrecognized country. So basically, you can't, like, let's say, open up a Burger King joint. So they try to do stuff that looks like Burger King. Stuff that would normally land you a lawsuit in a developed country, right? Yeah, they try to they try very hard to, so they're looking for people that are downshifters that come there and live off of pensions, and then they started this new niche of students, international students. Okay. So what they do is they set up these universities that are English language universities.
Okay.
And they're not accredited by anybody. They're just basically,
I was gonna say, what kind of university? Like, yeah, what happens? All right, so who do they attract then?
Well, they're attracting students from Africa primarily, and some from the Middle East, but mostly from Africa. And they're basically, these people don't really do their homework, I think, a lot of times. They come there, they spend £6,000, they're automatically admitted, they don't have to really, jump over any bars, and they're basically just taking their money. They spend this money, and for them that's a fortune.
There's the Cyprus University, what's it called?
Yeah, there are various Cyprus universities, international, whatever, Kibris University, whatever they call it. And then these African students come over, and they have no real way of making income except for making local money in Turkish lira. I mean, doing these local menial jobs in Turkish lira, And then what they do is they kind of involve them in this pyramid scheme. They get them to pull in
see.
their own buddies over there from. They make all these little
It's a
YouTube
pyramid
videos.
scheme.
Yeah, and this is this is possibly up to 8% of the population that's actually in the occupied part.
So
is these students who are very bitter and
So people that want to study abroad and get into European education, we have a lot of say Africans that go to Greece, Nigerians and from other countries that go study, get their degrees, and they go back home and they better their countries and their the towns. But now you have people similarly that are being duped into going into this.
Yes,
Kibris
University. Yes.
Kibris University. Kibris is the Turkish name of Kypros, Cyprus, and they have no real accreditation after they spend their money.
Yeah, it's useless. It's a useless degree, and not only that, but the worst part is for them, they think they're getting into the Schengen zone.
The Schengen, that's the free travel zone of Europe. Countries that are part of the European Union, they can travel without visas, and Cyprus is part of that, but not the occupied.
Not the Cyprus officially, the entire island is officially a part of the EU, but it's not that's the part that's not controlled by an EU member government. So but the students that show up there, they get into a lot of debt. Then they get involved in the pyramid scheme, and some of them resort to crime, and there have been suicides there and everything. So but I saw a lot of those students when I was there because they're in by Kyrenia. There's some of those schools.
Okay.
When I took a bus back to Nicosia, that's where you see a lot of them. So yeah, it's
they're gonna be pretty peed off after.
They are.
What happens? They can't go back home. They have no money.
They don't have money. They can't even buy a ticket. Some of them. It's terrible. They're in terrible shape.
You said they definitely try to get them into the drugs. Maybe some of the gangs, prostitution for the women. Definitely, that's how they get the slave market going. Maybe a lot of Middle Easterners are not going because they're more aware of what Turks do. Maybe
possibly. I don't know. Yeah, it's already
TV
a little bit outside
of
my wheelhouse, but
but there is a certain naivety that you can get an education and you're spending your money on a country that doesn't really exist.
Yeah, well, it's not going to get them what they want. They want a degree that's going to get them into the EU so they can have a good earning power, and it's useless, and they get duped, basically. So
don't go to Kibris University.
Yeah, don't go there. There's a whole bunch of them. As a matter of fact, there's a funny YouTube video where there's a big fight that breaks out on one of their campuses where they're all just beating each other up because they get so frustrated there. The tempers are running very high.
We feel bad for those people. We wish them the best. Now, tell us the other situation where these people are coming as retirees.
The downshifters.
Downshifters. You call it downshifters. That's an interesting term, George.
It's a term that's out there. Basically, you have people who are living
downtime.
Off of, well, downshifting, like on a manual drive transmission, right?
Manual. My wife does.
I cut my teeth on a manual transmission. So the bottom line is that there are people who are, let's say, for example, you own real estate. And you have, you're getting maybe $1,000 or so, or $2,000 or euros or whatever off of your real estate. You can come to a place like the occupied part, buy property there, which previously probably belonged to a Greek Cypriot.
Okay.
And obviously you're going to pay much less for it than you would if you legitimately bought property in the free part. And then you basically can just live off of that income. And including a pension as well. So if you had a pension, you could just live off of it, and you're in a beautiful country. But of course, the infrastructure is going to be.
Is it safe? Like, what happens if you fall and you break your knee? You have to go to the hospital.
I found out what happens. Not personally. I heard about what happens there. You know what happens there? If you got to go, if it's not an emergency, but if you have to go to the doctor, you have to get up at 7 a.m. to go. There's like a big line, a reception line, and if you get in and you're being treated. And you want to come back, you still have to go back at 7 a.m. in the reception line and wait there until they take you. It's really. I mean, they probably have some private practices there, but if you're on a budget, which is what most people are,
requires more envelopes.
Yeah, it's a very tricky situation with that. So people who obviously you get what you pay for, right? So they're going there and they're buying this, this fenced property basically. That's the only way to call it, and that's how they live.
So. What happens if there's a dispute? Can these people lose this property? Can they dispute it with some other legal entity, in this so-called government, or back in their native lands? Their consul? Is there a consul from Russia or from
No,
UK?
There's nobody there. It's an unrecognized country, so they can't have. There's nobody there.
So you're basically
except for a Turkish consulate, which is kind of a joke because it's basically like, okay, what are you doing?
It's the
here?
front.
What are you doing here? You're already part of the same.
They're gonna tax you more if you go to them. So basically, you're risking your life and your money if you're gonna do something like that. And there's a certain type of people that do that stuff.
Yeah, the downshifters.
Downshifters. That's what that is, right? The adventure takers, but they're not the downshifters.
Well, some people actually do try to work there, but they work very menial jobs, a lot of them, because like the real money jobs are like doing police and all that stuff, and they only give that to their own. It's
Obviously.
not, that's not working.
So the only other people that can't go to the Northern Republic of
the TRNC.
The TRNC, the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus, the occupied part, who has a leader, it doesn't have a president because it's not a real legal entity, are Armenians. Armenians are not allowed.
Well, if you have it, you can get. They can officially get a visa, but I honestly don't think anyone's
so.
going to bother to do that.
I think in the Turkish world,
I don't think it's that exciting for that they're going to go and do that. And,
Azerbaijan, Azeris don't allow Armenians
Right.
in that part and in northern part of Cyprus. So I wonder how Armenian friends feel about this, and how can we work with them, I guess, to find a solution. Because another thing that we wanted to discuss here very briefly is, can there be a union? Is it worth it? And who gets the most out of it? Right?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because this whole idea of reuniting the island, you always hear the bifederal, bizonal, whatever, by everything. It's like, I don't know. You see, this is like, I'm not a Cypriot, right? So I don't have a right to really have much of an opinion on it.
People think I'm a Cypriot, but I'm really not. I love Cyprus so much, like George.
Well, the bottom line, though, is like, when you're looking at a political solution to this problem, it's a mess. I mean, I've read about it. I read about it regularly. I'm just so curious what's going to happen. And I mean, with Erdogan in there, I don't think anything's going to happen. I mean, I think that's pretty obvious that
the first two shows
a dead issue right there.
We discussed about Erdogan as the fascist Islamist dictator of Turkey that just reconverted the Hagia Sophia, the great cathedral of holy wisdom in Constantinople, Istanbul, reconverted it back into a mosque after 80 years of secularism. It was a museum that Mustafa Kemal Atatürk himself had commissioned it to be that way. And he is backing out of the Treaty of Lausanne and all the treaties that Mustafa Kemal Atatürk had signed that recognized territorial integrity and borders of Cyprus and Greece. And I guess, Syria, Lebanon, other countries too. So Iraq. So things might not go well for unity right now, I think.
Well, I think the bigger problem, honestly...
NOCs, yeah.
Well, NOCs, yeah.
Within the island itself. With Greece, forget about it. That's not going to happen.
Well, that's another issue. But I think that the big problem here is that ultimately, look at it this way. What happened, right? You had Greek Cypriots living in the occupied part. Well, before it was occupied, right?
Yes.
When it was one country. Then what happened was that the Greeks were thrown out of there, the Greek Cypriots. Quite a few Turkish Cypriots over time also left, because you know what happened? They never got the economy back up to where it was.
Okay.
So they just left, and then what the Turkish government was doing from day one practically was they were sending Turkish settlers to live there from mainland Turkey.
Anatolian Turks.
Yeah.
So basically you have indigenous Greeks that became Muslim, Turkish Cypriots, and the ones that are the Orthodox.
Right.
And some other nationalities that used to live in Cyprus. I think there's the Armenians. There might be something called Maronites.
Maronites, yes, they're there. I didn't meet any there, but they're there, yeah.
And there's other people too, but it's a Greek island, and unfortunately, the ones that are now called Turkish Cypriot and the native, they're the same people basically. They have the same culture, attitude of life, so they don't even like the Turkish mainland Turks that are coming in, that are becoming Islamicized. They're building a lot of mosques and things that were not native to the occupied part of the north.
Right,
it has its mosques and stuff, but now it's like...
Yeah, you hear the call to prayer and stuff, but it's not... I mean, there's an incompatibility there that I've heard of. I didn't really obviously see it myself, but I think that the problem is that, here's what I'm thinking. If I'm a Cypriot living in, let's say I live in Nicosia, I live in, Ayanapa or wherever, right? And all of a sudden there's some kind of there's a solution. Question number one, okay, what to do about lost land, right?
Yes.
If you're a if you're a Greek Cypriot and you had a house in Kyrenia, someone else is living there now. Or is that person going to be told, okay, this is fenced goods, get out of here, right? What if that person is a settler? I think that's fair game to say, I'm sorry, you were not asked to come here by the official government of Cyprus, so what are you doing here? You're living on stolen property, leave. If they sold it to a Turkish Cypriot, that gets more involved. What about compensation to this person for the fact that you sold the property? And then not only that, but what about the question of an administration that made that decision to, have force this person out of their property? And like I'm thinking from a perspective of if I had lived someplace and my family had lived in that place and I had lived there for several generations and my family's buried on that land, how would I feel about being able to come back there? And I'm not sure how I feel because I do actually sort of have that issue with in my own past as a Russian, but when it comes to being a Cypriot, obviously they have their opinion on it, and the opinions are of course different as well.
We have met refugees, many that live here in New York with us, that come from northern Cyprus, and they tell us their stories, and it's a shame. They go back home in tears if they get to even visit it right now, and they don't know what the future holds. And I think it's good to discuss this in a further dialogue, maybe with some Cypriot officials and people from the community as well,
Absolutely.
George, in the quest for Prometheus. I think we gotta analyze this a little bit more, because Cyprus is very important, and it's an important, I think, point of coexistence. Can people coexist that are from different, invasions, nationalities? If there's a military presence in the island, where would these soldiers go? Are they going to leave the Turkish soldiers?
Well, I think they have to,
right? To have a coexistence. This is
I don't
what we're
see
talking
how
about.
it's possible. I don't see how it's possible to have any kind of a settled solution if there's going to be an army of another country there standing there.
So,
that's
from your
kind
visit,
of a lot.
Well, tell us what did you get out of it? I mean,
well, it's a different country than it was in 1974, and how are you going to make good with the people who are there now? That's the big question. Because those people, there's a settled solution. Those people are going to have free movement throughout the whole island.
There we go.
They're going to have free movement throughout the whole island, and according to some estimates, again, nobody really knows what's going on there, but according to some estimates, there's up to 700,000 people living there right now, including maybe a decent, they're not a majority or even a plurality, but a certain significant percent of these, not only of the downshifters, and then of course the students and all these other people. Like, what are they doing there? It's such a messy picture. So, like, how are you going to solve those problems? And not only that, but let's say you're never going to find the same country that you had in 1974. So.
No.
There are a lot of difficult things, and I don't want to really have a position on it because
the Greek Cypriots ready to let go of the richness that they have developed now in the south, which was underdeveloped back then.
Right, it was underdeveloped, and they actually got it to a much higher level than the occupied part.
So are they willing to let that go and have foreigners come in from the north, which are not even from the north, they're from other lands now.
Right, they're exactly.
Which is a small island, don't forget, this is not a giant country like America that takes everybody, or India or England. This is like a little tiny island in the Mediterranean. If you have too many foreign people going, it's going to change the ethnicity and the religion, and the impact will be felt in the future, and it's going to actually impact Greece as well.
Sure.
And these are the things that we want to discuss a little bit farther with you in the quest for Prometheus, and we're gonna do another show that we're gonna show footage from George's trips, because this is about George's trip to Cyprus in the north and occupied part, and we're gonna have hopefully a panel discussion too.
That'll be great.
Officials, all right. So please, if you like what you've seen and heard in our show here, make sure you follow us and like us on Facebook, Low Letters to Greece, and on Patreon.com on Hellenic History Series. We have many projects that are very interesting that deal with Hellenic issues, mythology, and even modern politics, as QFO Prometheus is. Music from Porphyra. We have an illustrated book coming out that I'm working on, and we have actually operas and other things that are all part of the world of the Hellenic History Series. So Patreon.com, Hellenic History Series, and hashtag Q4, the number 4 Prometheus, for everything else to do with our show here. I'm Billy Chrissochos.
And I'm George Selinsky.
All right, see you next week. Have a good night.
See you next week. Take care.